And Louise is just getting her microphone as well. Adam and John Gibbons as well from the Anfield Wrap. Adam Catterall from Fight Disciples. Yeah. And welcome to Pods of the Day.
Hello. It feels a little bit silly to come up here and talk about podcasts that just talk shit about sports for an hour every week when we've just come off something heavy like Katie, but sports podcasting is a massive area, and we've got some guys on the stage here who make brilliant podcasts, all very different as well. As you know, it's called Pods of the Day. I am going to be Gary Lineker, but with a little bit less of a crisp fetish than Gary has. And if you like tortured sporting analogies, you're going to love this session because we've got loads of them. To start off, I'm going to let the guys introduce themselves, tell you the name of their podcasts, and I've asked each of them to compare their show to a footballer, okay? So there's your first tortured analogy. As he's next to me, we'll start with Jay Mudshed.
Jay from Full-Time Devils podcast. We started a podcast we started it a few years ago. The channel's been going for about 6 years, mainly on YouTube. We started the podcast a few years ago, then we stopped doing it. Then I took over as content producer and brought it back in, and it's just been growing since then. In answer to your question, to compare us to football, can I cheat a little bit? Can I compare us to a football manager?
United fans.
I'm a United fan, yeah, so you know what I mean? It's par for the course. I'm going to compare us to a football manager. I'm going to compare us to Jose Mourinho. Now, that might not be a popular choice among a lot of United fans, but I like to think that, like us all over us, we're always good box office. I think a lot of our listeners will agree. They might not like our opinions, but they sort of like listening to them, like what we've got to say, and it'd be a little bit duller if we weren't around.
So we've got John Gibbons from the Anfield Wrap.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, we are the Anfield Wrap. We are based in Liverpool, as you might have guessed, if you do follow football. Yeah, cheers for Liverpool is right. Co-ed indeed. And yeah, I've got to say Stevie G, have a nice Steven Gerrard, you know what I mean, because we're dynamic, we're world-renowned, but also, last 2 years we've come silver in the British Podcast Awards, both times to the BBC, so losing out to titles to better resourced Manchester competition has become...
And then next to John, we've got Adam Catterall from Fight Disciples.
Yep, I am from Fight Disciples. We specialise in talking about boxing and mixed martial arts. We've been going for 4 years. We didn't get silver at the British Podcast Awards. We got gold back to back. Might as well, eh? Might as well. And I'll probably be spending the next 45 minutes telling you all about that. The football that I compare myself to, I'm going to give you a bit of both. We've got a bit of Roy Keane and a bit of Souness. Leaders, love a scrap, and actually, I'd like to say quite funny. All right? We'll go with that.
And then finally, right on the end, we've got Louise Gwilym from Netballers Pod.
Sorry.
You with us?
More might be coming. So I work for 5 Live. I produce 2 podcasts. So I produce Rugby Union Weekly, which is pretty big, and then Netballers, which is new, and for the Netball World Cup. So I've got 2 footballers. I'm going to stick with the girls for Netballers, and say Alex Scott, who's small in stature but got plenty of sass. And she's doing it for the girls in what's traditionally a man's world, and she's on the rise. And then Rugby Union Weekly, we are up north, so I'm going to go with Vinny Company. I'm not a City fan, don't worry. He is a leader. He's got, everyone likes him, but he's a bit crazy, and he's capable of some magic.
Brilliant. I'm Jim. I work for a company called Sports Social. I'm head of Sports Social, which is part of Communicorp UK. We make on-demand sports audio content. We produce 7 daily football shows every week, and I also, with Ant, who's the bearded fellow who'll be sticking cans to his head later, probably, trust me, you'll know what I'm talking about when you see it. I make a show called On the Left Side, which is a satirical football show, and I say it's a bit like Peter Crouch. It's a little bit underrated, it's got good banter, and no one can quite work out why it's any good. So, we're going to talk about these guys' podcasts today, and we're going to start with Adam and Fight Disciples, and I'm going to play you a little clip from Fight Disciples.
I'm sitting here having a beer and I'm watching UFC, but I'm thinking about what he said. I'm thinking a 17-year-old lad's just described 2 YouTubers as superstars. Like, for me, a superstar's friggin' David Beckham or
Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, they're superstars. These are kids off YouTube. Now, then I'm starting to think, this is a generational thing then. I'm not bought into it because...
It's not your world.
It's not my world, it's a generational thing. So then I'm thinking, Okay, who's a superstar to me then?
Right.
If a superstar for me was fighting in the main event in Los Angeles tonight, would I be as bought in? So then I'm thinking, okay.
If the Gallagher brothers were having a scrap.
Bingo. So if Noel was fighting Liam on the top of the bill on Saturday night, would you have bought it on Sky?
Fucking right, I
Exactly.
So we've got you talking there, Adam, about the big YouTube fight between two people that I've never heard of and I can't remember the names of now.
Neither have I, and I work in the industry, mate.
But they were seeing how this YouTube fight, this kind of fake fight, has disrupted sports. How do you think podcasting, sports podcasting on a whole, has disrupted sports broadcasting?
Massively, I think. I can only speak from my own personal point of view. For those that do know, I've been a radio broadcaster for the best part of 15, 16 years, mainly in music, entertainment, working in commercial radio and Radio 1 and various places like that. And I think from my own personal journey of coming out of that and trying to make my way into sport, it was quite difficult to be taken seriously, because obviously once you're seen interviewing the likes of Ed Sheeran and various people like that, then to go and want to be interviewing on a serious matter people like Conor McGregor and Anthony Joshua, my bosses in the radio industry always thought, well, there's someone else that could do that type of job. So for me and Nick, who you just heard on that podcast there, we decided to set up a platform in order to showcase our talents. And hopefully off the back of that, then mainstream media started to take us a little bit more seriously. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, I don't want to keep going on about it, but by winning one of those awards, the first one that we won, it then started to prick the ears up of people that were working in mainstream media, the likes of a TalkSport, the likes of a BT Sport, who then maybe were looking to freshen up their lineups, to maybe give a little bit more of a fresher attitude to fight sports, which, let's be honest, if you watch it on TV, it is quite old. You know what I mean? There's a lot of guys that are 40, 50, 60 years of age, middle-class white guys that are obviously presenting that type of stuff. So my mainstream bosses looked at us at that particular point through our success and decided to take a little bit of a plunge. And over the last 4 years, gradually, we're now, me and Nick together are the guys that present all TalkSport's fight coverage. We're now presenting all BT Sports UFC coverage. So I think the platform of podcasting can most certainly make a major step forward if that's what you're wanting to do and wanting to get into some type of mainstream broadcasting.
I think it's fair to say that everyone who does a sports podcast isn't going to end up on TalkSport or 5 Live or whatever it is. But is there a way that sports podcasting as a whole, and to all of you, can complement kind of mainstream media rather than compete against it?
Yeah, I think doing mainstream media now, the amount of guys that I have on shows that are running podcasts, running blogs, that are fan-driven media, that are obviously catering on platforms like Spotify and Audio Boom and iTunes and what have you, is probably now 50-50 with what you would class as traditional media, the guys from, you know, various newspapers or various television channels that you're going to see on a week-by-week basis. So therefore, regarding the complementing it, most certainly, I personally think that at some point it's going to be the main media, which is a weird thing to say now, but I think podcasting, YouTube channels and various things like that, that is where we're all going. We're living in an on-demand society, aren't we? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I very rarely watch live television unless it's sport, you know? I'll always come back to something. It'll be recorded or there's a box set or whatever it may be, and I'll come back to it at a later time and watch it at my own convenience. I think audio consumption's coming that way as well. And podcasting is, without any shadow of a doubt, the driving force of that.
Go on, Louise, you're politely raising your hand at the end of the line.
I think if you talk about sports podcasting as well, you assume that it has to be for the fans, the fanatics, people who are absolutely dedicated to that sport. So with Rugby Union Weekly, that's exactly what our audience is. We want the people who are going to tune in weekly and want analysis and fun. But with Netballers, we were given the podcast as a commission to try and bring an audience around something the BBC had acquired, which was the Netball World Cup. And my motto, and I guess the reason I think I won the pitch for it, was I said it's a netball podcast that we don't talk about netball. No one, I don't think, generally wants to talk about pivoting and footwork and, oh, I broke a nail. But that's kind of exactly what we did. We were, our first episode was all about netball stereotypes. So you can't move with the ball. It's a worse version of basketball. You have to be 6'5". And we were kind of breaking down the barriers of people who hated netball at school because you had to be on the outside courts and you were cold and your teacher was horrible and you wanted to playing football, but football was for boys. So that was a really interesting space to move into as a sports fanatic and a netball fanatic, trying to do a podcast that wasn't appealing to people like me, but was appealing to your casual audience, you know, girls who might be wanting to get into sport and the messages that being fit and doing exercise could bring. And we also did it with presenters who had never presented before, were BAME and were women. So there was all these amazing things that were going on with this podcast. But yeah, it was really different to what I'd worked on for 2 years in Rugby Union Weekly. So I think when you say sports podcasting, it's also moving into that entertainment space with something like Peter Crouch. You've got your kind of two types of sports podcasts now.
I think there's something that every single podcast on this stage and every single successful podcast has in common, actually, which I don't know if you guys agree with, that it's not necessarily what you're talking about, it's how you're talking about that becomes important.
Massively, look, we are all in the entertainment industry, and every one of you should feel like you're in the entertainment industry, and if you're not, then you're not going to be successful. You know, you're not competing against the other person who does a podcast like you. You're saying, why should this person listen to your podcast on the way to work instead of Spotify or instead of reading Twitter or whatever else it is? That's all those things you're competing against. So if you want entertaining, you know, forget about everything else. No one's bothered. You know, the best industries. The guy from Netflix is the best. He says he's competing with sleep, which is I mean, what a thing to go up against. He's going one-on-one against sleep. He's like, forget the BBC. I'm going against that pick. And so, like, you know, sleep. I mean, I wouldn't go that far with everyone, do you know what I mean? But you are competing against anything else that's going to take that competition. So for us, I think the biggest thing that we did was see ourselves as being entertainers and seeing ourselves as part of the entertainment industry. And you've got to be, you know, you can do that in loads of different ways. It doesn't have to be, you know, all singing and all dancing and things like that. But, you know, how are you going to entertain? Is it by, you know, being thought-provoking? Is it by just being funny? Is it by, you know, giving people a way of thinking about things or educating them? You know, there's lots of different ways to entertain, but we are all entertainers at the end of the day, even if we're not, you know, tap dancing onto stage. And so I think that's the attitude that we all need to have, is that how you're going to engage someone for a length of time that's not going to make them go, oh, stop, I've got to go and listen to something else.
So as mentioned at the top, John's from the Anfield Wrap, double silver podcast, which I'm pretty sure they only give you silver, so next year you can go, this year's our year. It's kind of a Liverpool catchphrase, isn't it? So we're going to hear a little bit of John's podcast now, which has become, it's a bit of a phenomenon. It's become a must listen to any Liverpool fan, pretty much. Oh, hang on. Here we go.
Post-match show, it's John Gibbons for the Anfield Wrap as Liverpool beats Barcelona by 4 goals to 0. What's it? 4 goals to 0.
No way, John.
The voice you can hear to my right, if you can do it that way, is Stu Jacko Wright. You've also heard Craig Cannon there. We've also got Ian Ryan. Stu, on the way there, I was feeling adventurous and had a pint, so I put on a bet of Liverpool to win an extra time. God, what a shit outside field.
Only us. It's only us. I've been asked all week, you know, did I have any open all? And there's 90% of my brain all week I've been saying is that says, oh, no, there's no chance. But as a Liverpool fan, there's always that mad 10% where you think, this could happen. This could happen. And Jesus Christ, what we've seen there tonight, I mean, we've heard all the stories from our fathers, from our grandfathers, from our uncles, from everyone of these legendary Anfield nights, but we've just seen the greatest of them all.
I think what I get when I listen to your podcast, John, and I think you'll hear, throughout the whole of today, you'll hear one word said more than any other, and that will be authenticity. And I think that's what comes through with the Anfield Wrap, is you are genuine fans, and you have genuine passion for your team and your sport.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few different reasons I chose that clip, and not just because I wanted everyone in Manchester to remember that brilliant moment. It's that game finished at 10:15, and that podcast was out by 11 o'clock. And so when you hear people like the last speakers, the last but one from Naked Attraction, talking about sitting at home taking arms out, and that's good if you're not time specific. So if you're doing an interview and it doesn't matter when it's going out, then fine, you sit at home and take arms out. But we didn't want to get that out as soon as possible. You need to be part of the event. So if any of you guys are in an industry or doing podcasts about things that are happening, then get it out as soon as you can. We'll sacrifice. Look, we'll spend a lot of money on equipment. We'll, reinvest but, I've got a bubble mic in my pocket there, and if something interesting happens now, I'll record a podcast with you and get it out. Audio Boom, you can record straight to Audio Boom now and be out. That's zero editing. Do you know what I mean? And so that is raw. That's not the best produced audio you'll hear, in your life, even today. But that's, you can hear background noise, but it's passionate, it's lively, it's engaging, and it is straight there. Because when something happens, not just in football, but in politics or in culture or whatever, and you see Twitter exploding and everyone's talking about that thing, you need to be part of that conversation. Don't go home and think about it for 2 days and go, we need to produce it more. Oh, there was a little bit going on in the background. We need to take that out. Just forget about it. Just get it out and be part of that. And I think that's the thing the reason I wanted to play that bit of audio is because that is 4 guys, and it's not always guys, I promised you, but 4 guys who just can't believe what they've just seen and want to share that with the rest of the world, and we're part of it, and are in a pub which is 50 metres from Anfield, so guys who are listening in America or Australia who couldn't be there, that's where they want to be. They want to be in the pub after the game with Liverpool fans celebrating, and we put them there, and we get it out as soon as possible so they can listen, so that is why I chose that audio.
There's some really interesting research that was published recently from Edison Research and Podcast One, which talks about super listeners, so that's people that listen to more than 5 hours of podcasts a week, and their relationship with podcasters and individual voices and how deep that can become to the extent that it can even heal rifts with brands who sponsor those podcasts. It's like really incredible research. Now, you guys started off as 3 guys, was it? Anfield Wrap originally, was it 3 of you?
I think 4, yeah.
4 of you, and now it's a cast of thousands pretty much. How do you maintain that identity and that relationship when there's so many of you involved in creating this product?
I think we're very clear about what we want to achieve. We do have a mission statement. It's up in our wall in our office, and it's to share the journey supporting Liverpool Football Club from the heart of the city. And that's what we think about every day. And so everything we do is, if we say, well, does that do that thing that's on the wall? And if it doesn't, we don't do it. And so I think just remembering what you're about, remembering why you started. And we have changed, and it's difficult because we started as a hobby, and now we're a full-time business. And so we employ 14 people in Liverpool, and we've got many others, around 20 or 30 who we pay on an ongoing basis. So that does sort of change what you do, really. We can't, pretend to be these kind of, this little thing anymore, because it's not, it's a reasonable size industry. But I think, you mentioned about being authentic. We sort of we tell our story a lot along the way. So we say, well, yeah, so we charge for podcasts. I'm going to talk more about that this afternoon, the monetization thing. But we charge, so we say, okay, if you want, we'll do so much for free, but if you want more, you're going to have to pay for it. And we're honest about why we do that and what we do with that money. And so when we buy new equipment, we're like, look, we've just bought this, we're investing. When we take on people in Liverpool, take on young people and give them jobs, we tell people, whether they like it or not. I don't care if you're shy, you've got a camera in your face and you're saying, I'll come to work here and how brilliant that is and their story. And so I think the more you can tell the story, the more you can feel part of it. So what's nice is our listeners feel part of our success. So we came to Manchester on Thursday night and actually won a marketing award, which was really cool for a big thing we did in Liverpool around Trent Alexander-Arnold. And our listeners are actually sort of just as pleased as we are, really, because they're like, I remember those guys when they were recording, above a Chinese restaurant in Liverpool and stuff like that. And now look at them, do you know what I mean? And so it's making your listeners feel part of a community, really, feel part of your success, and that they want you to do well. And so when you are a profitable business, which I'm sure a lot of you are either getting to or hoping to, then instead of resentment, oh, look at them now, which does happen in the north, let's face it. It's instead, what I made up for them because I know how hard they've worked and I know the hours they've put in and I know that they're dedicated to doing the best possible thing for us.
You said the magic words there, full-time business, which means you're going to be swamped with questions during the lunch break. We're going to hear from...
that walk and tour. You have to come there. I'm taking my butties out and getting to know Manchester.
Right, we're going to hear from Louise's podcast next. Like she said, she produces 2 podcasts, Rugby Union and also Netballers Pod. It's Netballers Pod we're going to hear from.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Netballers! From BBC 5 Live.
Right, girls, England's men have just won the Cricket World Cup. And guess where we are? We're at the Netball World Cup, and I reckon England can do it here too. It's come...
No, don't jinx it. You jinx it.
I'm Bessie Glover.
I'm Sasha Corbin. And I'm Kadeen Corbin.
And this is...
Netballers from BBC 5 Live.
Right, you ready for a tortured footballing analogy? So every good striker needs to find space in the box. And at the moment, I think there's a stat that 570 podcasts are released every single day onto iTunes. So how does a new podcast, like Netballers, find that space?
So yeah, I think you've touched on the most difficult thing with Netballers was I'm a netballer, I play social netball, I'm kind of in that world. I knew there was an audience there, but how do you market it and how do you get it out? So we went really grassroots. So we went and talked to people who were playing netball every week. We found clubs in Manchester, in the north, in the south. We used our contacts to get people to listen. We absolutely knew that there was an audience there and that they were crying out from it. So I'd say number one, if you are going to launch a podcast, do some market research. There was one other netball pod in the whole of the UK. In fact, I think there was 2 in the world. For a sport that is the most played sport by females in the UK, that's astounding if you consider how many there would be for rugby or for football. So we knew the market was there. We went out and asked people what they wanted from a netball podcast, and all the feedback was, we don't want like a Sky Sports, a football focus, and analysis of a netball match. We want a bit, but we want to know the characters. We want to know why women play it, why they love it, and why we should go and watch it. So BBC were pretty smart, and I said the only time to launch a netball pod would be around the Netball World Cup, so we had a big peg. And I think, as John was saying earlier, we started in the weeks before, so I think we started 3 months before the Netball World Cup to kind of build up to the event, and then once the event came, we podded, I think 3-4 times that week, and so like 8 times across the tournament, and we didn't miss a beat on what was happening at the tournament. So we were in Liverpool where it was being held. We had the international stars on the pod, we had the fans, we had their families. We made it sound like we were there. And the best thing about it all was we had 2 former England internationals who you heard on there, Sasha and Kadeen. They were our presenters. They just love netball and they were in the space, and all their friends came on the pod and they just sounded like they were enjoying it. So it took a bit of time to build up, but once the Netball World Cup started, our listeners went massively up, and we were really lucky. We were backed up by Sounds, and we had quite a big marketing campaign in and around Liverpool. But I think we knew that there was a space there, and we really did our research on how we could take advantage of that.
You talked about your team that you pulled together there. I mean, you're in quite a unique position compared to probably most of the guys here, where it's not just guys in a bedroom or in a pub putting a show together. You've got a budget, you've got a platform. So how do you go around? Very small
budget. Very small.
Millions of pounds. How do you pull that team together? What do you look for in the qualities of your presenters when you're going, this is what I want my podcast to sound like?
So yeah, I obviously produce a rugby podcast, which is predominantly male. So I, as a female producer, just wanted something that more reflected the conversations I'd have with my friends, and have the same sound as rugby, but it be uniquely female. So I'd been in the netball world, I knew who the characters were, so my number one was to go out and find characters. So I think it's all in your presenters and who you put on air. So I had these 2 girls, I don't know if anyone knows them, they're called Sasha and Kadeen Corbin. They are just sassy, down to earth, from the streets of London, grew up in Tottenham, just bundles and bundles of energy. And you can see that by watching them do post-match interviews or, looking at their social media. So I knew I wanted them, and I went out and got them. And they were so excited. I think I sold the idea that the pay wasn't very much. But because it was this new exciting opportunity that I managed to sell to them, they signed up. So we started with them, and I thought, right, they can just do it. They'll launch it. They'll be brilliant. What I kind of hadn't factored in is that they'd never, apart from a post-match interview, never done any media, never talked on air, never been a presenter. So I quickly realised that we were going to have to bring in someone just to guide it. I mean, there's Raw, and then there was them. So I was like, we are producing a certain standard. We are producing for the BBC, so it couldn't be exactly what I wanted to be, which was just chuck them in and let them go for it. So we've got so many young people that are brilliant at the BBC. So I found an upcoming presenter, and I was like, right, how do I take 2 girls who are from Tottenham and totally different to this girl who's grown up in, I think she was in Southampton, and they just had different worlds. But I thought, right, we've got to try it. So we just went for coffee and went for a few drinks, and immediately they clicked, and I thought, right, we've struck gold here. And if they hadn't, I had a backup of 10 other presenters that I was just going to keep chucking with these girls over coffee and making sure one of them clicked. So I think that's really difficult when you're getting a podcast together, is that if they don't click off air, do not put them on air. you don't have time, I don't think, especially when you've got a short commission for the BBC or another big provider, to form chemistry. Like, obviously it gets better, and their progress across the 10 episodes was huge, but if they don't get on off air, it's not gonna sound authentic. It goes back to authenticity on air. So we chucked them all together, and yeah, I don't know, I hit gold, and it was a bit of luck. It really was, but I knew that those two girls were the magic, and everything had to be shaped around them. So my whole podcast pitch was those two, and I didn't want anyone else, and I basically said, if we don't get them, I don't think your podcast is going to work.
You touched on it there, how important having niches, having like a USP. I want to talk to each of you in turn. Like, how did you find your niche? How did you pick your niche? And was it there from the off? Did you kind of find that focus from day one, or was it something that developed as you went through? You can start on this one, Jay.
Well, for us, we're obviously a fan channel, so we're based around the fans, just giving the fans a voice. And, as John was talking about, authenticity. And we can have that honesty that perhaps mainstream media can't have. I mean, a lot of our presenters have actually gone on to work in the BBC. A lot of them have gone on to work for MUTV. And they always sort of say to me, they say the same thing, we're sort of restricted in what we can say, we're restricted in what we can comment on. I mean, if United get beat 3-1 off, or United get beat off Newcastle, whatever, we can go on and say they were shit, this player wasn't good enough, blah, 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 blah. I've got lads that work for MUTV all say, oh, it was a good performance, and, that's the nature of the beast, and, we can do that. We can give a platform. There's a big sort of debate going on at United at the minute with our owners, the Glazers. A lot of people, well, practically all United fans hate them. We can say that. We can say we want rid of them, we don't like them. You go on MUTV, they don't mention them. The BBC will talk about them, but again, Gary Neville gets a lot of stick on Sky Sports because he won't go after the Glazers. We don't have that problem. We can just say whatever we want, really, within reason, obviously, although our lawyers may disagree. But yeah, we can say whatever we want, and I think that's our niche, is that having that sort of authenticity and that honesty. We're not restricted. We're just fans. We're not experts. One of the first things we'll say on a podcast, we're not football experts, we're not tacticians, and we're pretty honest about that. You're not going to get insightful analysis a lot of the time. You're just going to get 3 or 4 guys or girls just sat chatting about United, chatting about the game, and even the topic even goes off into other areas that aren't football related. So I think that's our niche, just being able to be honest about our club, being able to tap into the fans as well, and just getting fans on. Someone else was talking about, you find fans that are really good, you sort of give them a platform. And we've done that. We've done a lot of collaborations with other channels. And also, we speak to fans after the game. After every game, we're at the game, talking to fans, doing fan cams for the YouTube channel. And if we get people on that are really entertaining and really, the viewers like them, we'll get them into the studio and we'll record a podcast with them.
John, you can just say what he said, if you want that as your answer.
No, I agree with all of that. What I would add is if there's a podcast out there that you'd like to listen to that doesn't exist, well then do it, and then you're filling a kind of niche there. And so for us, when we started, it was a case of, well, I can listen to, say, 5 Live and listen for an hour and wait for the 10 minutes where they talk about Liverpool, or I can just listen to an hour of Liverpool, and if that's what you're interested in. So that's obviously a very football-specific thing, but, that's relevant to whatever. If there's a current affairs radio show that's half an hour, but really you just want the celeb stuff and you can't be bothered waiting, why are they talking about this? And then you just do that, and so there'll be other people who want that. So be specific, know what you're going after, and then fill that gap in the market. Because as I say, our kind of, for the industry, our kind of strength, if you like, is that we can be as specific as you want. So we're not looking to make any of us here, most of us here aren't looking to make, something for the masses, are we? We're not looking to make something that's going to appeal to everyone. If you're just looking to appeal to a certain group of people, then just target everything you do at that certain group of people, and then I think that'll work.
Adam?
Listen, I think we've been quite blessed, whilst I've been in this room anyway, listening to the guys on the stage and Katie just before with some of the things that she was saying. Everything rings true with me. I mean, authenticity, immediacy, and obviously the chemistry I think you were talking about 2 moments ago is so key. What we did, we spent about 9 months from launch not marketing ourselves at all, because I found it from my own history in radio, get the product right, get what you're doing bang on, and you've got some wonderful tools now with uploading systems, whoever you use, SoundCloud, Audioboom, whoever you use, to have a look at your analytics, have a look at it and really study it and get to grips with how people are consuming your content, how people are listening to it, where they're listening to it, which episodes are doing better than others. Personally, when I first started, thinking back to what Kate was saying about imposter syndrome, I was obsessed with getting the biggest names on. Let's get the biggest names in fight sports on our podcast because that's what people want to listen to. And don't get me wrong, those episodes did extremely well and they said some wonderful stuff and some of that content did extremely well for us. But it was the episodes with the chemistry on between me and Nick, being the lads in the pub, talking like nobody else can talk, you know, not like mainstream media, not just sitting on the fence, giving an actual opinion and speaking and representing our audience. They're the ones that absolutely went crazy for us. And they're still to this day our biggest listened to episodes. So in that 9-month period, just analysing what works, what doesn't work, doing more of the things that I genuinely thought, well, our audience are liking this, so let's do a bit more of that. Let's see what that's all about. Again, using those analytics that are at your fingertips now. And then you kind of shape your product. And once you've got that product, as I'm sure you're hearing, that's when you start to market, and hopefully that's when you'll see your listenership start to boom if you've got it right.
Can I just jump in? Sorry, because we found exactly the same. You know, we were, you know, it's the imposter syndrome, I suppose, isn't it? At first, you're like, oh, we need big names, or we need, you know, play people who've played football, and we quickly realised that you don't have to struggle to hear what a footballer thinks about footy, you know what I mean? You just put Sky Sports on and you'll hear loads of them talking. And so having the confidence that people listen to your podcast for you is really, really important. And it took us a while to get that because you think, well, who am I? Do you know what I mean? I'm just, this person who's got a mic. But if your podcast is going to get popular, it's going to be for you and the people you do it with week in, week out. And so people to listen to you. That was a massive thing for us, like realising that you don't just have to fill it with the people who are already, you know, everywhere on the media.
I think to counter that, so yeah, exactly. We found that, say for Rugby Union Weekly, it's a huge podcast, and for me, it's completely changed the way I do my job. So I'm the 5 Live Rugby producer, and traditionally, I don't have a radio background, so when I came in the job, I was kind of told, right, thank God, we're not going to produce hour-long radio programs anymore. You're not going to focus on linear radio like you're going to focus on podcasts. So we would go to, say, like the World Cup and England Rugby media session, and England Rugby would give us 4 players and the head coach. And traditionally, you'd have done a 2-minute interview, 4 minutes here, turned it into this long radio show that you don't really know if people are tuning because they want to listen to the show or they're just on the car and chuck on 5 Live. So we've completely flipped that, and with our podcast, we take, so on it we've got 3 ex-England rugby players and then kind of a host, presenter, journalist. We take that 5-10 minutes we might get with Eddie Jones or Owen Farrell or Kyle Sinclair, and instead of doing your traditional news interview, which, as you can hear on the BBC News Channel or Sky Sports, we just do something completely out the box. So you've got this big name, but then, so during the World Cup, we had Mario Itoje talking about his favourite Disney character. We had Carl Sinclair, who we did Mastermind with, and he sat down and answered 10 questions on the Rugby World Cup, and he was so angry when he only got 8 out of 10 right. I mean, he's the biggest rugby nose you've ever met. So for us, it's about those characters and about our presenters and about them, but people probably also listen because they know that if they get Eddie Jones in a room or Warren Gatland or someone huge, they're going to do something completely different, and they're going to get out of them something that maybe me as a reporter or someone from the BBC as a news presenter isn't going to get. And I think that access is massively key for us, and just, completely changing how you interview someone. It doesn't have to be formal, and obviously we video it all. So then from one 5-minute interview that's on a podcast, it then goes on the BBC Sport website, it's then on Twitter, and as Katie was saying before, it's just all the platforms that you can then put it on after.
That segs beautifully into the clip we've got from Jay, from Full Time Devils, which is them talking to what former United player was it?
I think it's Brian McClare.
Brian McClare, right.
Were there any instructions to not get involved, to get involved, they don't like it?
Now, the instruction would always be simple. The manager would always choose a player, and most of the times he was right, who he thought was the one that made the other team tick. I can't remember who particularly was in that game, but you can't legislate for things. There was a tackle on Dennis Irwin that inflamed my inner rage, and I accidentally kicked Nigel twice on the back. And then after, accidentally, just very quickly accidentally kicked him twice. And then before you know it, Michael Thompson's got me by the throat, and Tony Adams is there, and Anders Limpar, being really brave, runs behind me and punches me in the side of the head, for which I ended up with 2 stitches, and Paul Ince chased him around the pitch like it was in the playground. Still the defences up at the time, he's got him pinned down right by the fences, and all the United fans are baying him like to rip Anders' throat out, you know. So there's no way that either manager could have predicted that was going to happen, because I didn't predict it before the game, you know.
We've talked about two different approaches to having guests on. Adam was saying that it's a kind of a network, or can be a network thing, which they kind of abandoned. The idea you can spread to different people. Had Louise talking about doing different things with guests as well. Full-time Devils kind of take a bit more of a traditional approach, I guess, with guests, don't they?
Yeah, the reason I chose that clip was because it sort of highlights that things you might think are a disadvantage to you can actually be an advantage. Because Brian McClare, we sort of reached out to him and he came on the channel, and he's been approached in the past by MUTV and the BBC, and what he doesn't like is he can't say what he wants. He's got no filter, Chucky. If you talk to him, he'll just say, he was talking then about starting a 21-man brawl at a game against Arsenal, and he was just he was basically just bragging about it. It was like, yeah, you know, I punched him and he punched me and I kicked him twice, and then the referee booked one player and then it just carried on. It was like madness in this day and age now, it'd have been abandoned, the game would have been abandoned, but he couldn't go on MUTV and talk about that. He couldn't go on Sky and probably talk about that in the way he did. And it's sometimes having that sort of just being able to do that, being able to be honest, being able to be unrestricted is your advantage, because, yeah, we can't get, you know, MUTV have just launched a podcast and they can get, you know, Paul Pogba on there, or they can get some sort of, you know, the best ex-players you can think of. They can get Gary Neville or Ryan Giggs, and we have a limit into who we could get. But that works to our advantage, because a lot of our listeners or viewers would rather listen to someone talking about the time and get a game like that where it all kicks off than hearing someone talking about something where they can only say certain things, they can't be critical, they can't be too honest. You know, and that's the way it is on our podcast, and that's what, you know, other people have alluded to. You sort of talk about what you want. I mean, I remember once United got beat at West Ham. We did a podcast afterwards, and for half an hour we were talking about Peter Kane Phoenix Knights. And then we started talking about the football. Someone said, you know what, we really should talk about the game last week. All right, okay. And then loads of the comments were, we loved it until you started talking about football. That was like the first 30 comments all saying the same. Can you not talk about comedy, Peter Kay, a bit more? So it was just like, you know, as a fan, you know what you want to talk about. You know what you like listening to as people that are involved in, you know, certain things that you enjoy. You know the best thing is to talk about, or just where the conversation takes you. And we embrace that. We don't have those restrictions. We can't probably get Sir Alex Ferguson to come on, but we don't need that. You know, we can get someone like an ex-player or different fans who were at certain games. And a lot of our listeners just like to hear that. John was talking earlier about the fact, you know, you're recording near Anfield, and you'll have people from all over the world listening and sort of tapping into that and feeling like they were there. And that's very much the same with Manchester United fans. We're pains me to say it, we're a global brand. But a lot of our listeners that live miles away, they've never been to England, let alone Old Trafford. So when you're talking about being at a game and describing what the atmosphere was like and describing what it was like and some of the chants and things like that, they love all that. And they can't get that anywhere else. They're not going to get that on Sky Sports. They're not going to get that at BT. They might get a quick clip off after the game, but they're not going to get that sort of authenticity, that honesty. And just that unrestrictedness, that being able to say whatever you want about the club or about certain games. And we find that in this day and age as well, yes, we do have quite a big platform, quite a big audience, but if you reach out to a lot of ex-players or people involved in the game, a lot of them will talk to you. You've got that advantage now. You can message people on Instagram, you can message people on Twitter. You know, it's not that difficult now to get hold of people. It's, you know, I was a journalist for years, and it just got easier and easier to get hold of people as sort of time went on. And I think that's something you can always tap into. You don't have to think, well, I'm not the BBC, so I can't get hold of someone. You can. If you want, if you try, you'd be amazed, because, just to end on this, we speak to a lot of ex-players, and a lot of them are bored. They're just bored. They're sat around, you probably back me up on it, John. They're sat around, they've got nothing to do, they don't train anymore, and not all of them are on Sky, a lot of them aren't, you know, getting a lot of work, and you say to them, do you fancy coming and spending half an hour talking about that great game you had where you scored loads of goals? You know, yours massage the ego, it's one of them. It's one of them, innit? That game where you were amazing, we'd love to hear about that in, 1983. And they're like, oh yeah, I'll come and chat to you about that. And it works, man, it does, you know, you don't have to have that massive platform, people will come and chat to you.
I think one of the fun things about podcasting is that you can break the rules. I've worked in radio for 22 years now, and there's so many rules and restrictions and things you can't do and things you can do, and podcasting is a brilliant way you can just forget all about that and do what you want. I listen to so many boring sports podcasts that people mimicking what they do on the radio. So if you are going to do a podcast, just do something different. Louise, we've got to wrap up, I'm afraid. Unless you be really quick.
Threat is that you can all do something we can't. We have so many rules and so many regulations. I would say don't try and be like the BBC, the best voice on something. Do something completely different, because we are probably always going to get the biggest names, and we're trying to do different stuff with them, and we probably are going to get the big interviews and, you know, splash it out everywhere. But you can do something we can't. You can be more authentic, you can be more out there, you can swear, you can do ridiculous things, and they're going to get as big, if you do something that authentic and that real, they're going to get as big shares as ours.
Thank you very much for listening. We haven't got time for questions, but you can get any of us or those that are hanging around.
Jim, we have time for a few questions.
Oh, we do have time for questions.
We do, yeah. So
West Ham Tottenham kicks off in 7 minutes.
we have time. All right. So if anybody has a couple of quick questions, so at the back I'm going to run around. Here we go. This is about as sporty as I get normally.
It's true, I've seen him play football.
Yeah. So say the name of your podcast as well. Give it a plug.
I'm John. I'm a Blackpool fan, and I run a Seasiders podcast, Blackpool Fans Podcast. Question for John, really. John, you mentioned that you do a kind of a podcast straight after the game. Do you have any particular equipment that you use? Because we've done a couple, and we find out there's quite a lot of noise, and it's quite difficult to hear us like over the noise from the pub. So what kind of equipment do you use?
It varies really. So we've got a bubble mic that goes straight into an iPhone, which is really good in terms of, you know, immediacy. So if I'm somewhere but someone else is putting the show up somewhere else, so say for the away game, for example, you know, if we're down and we're doing it straight after, then want to send it back, you can record straight onto that with a bubble mic that goes right into your iPhone. You can WhatsApp that to someone, and then they can kind of do the work on it elsewhere. For home games, we do have a bit more kit. What I'd say is try and find directional mics if you can. So if you plug into, so we've got a 4-way, I think it's by Morant's. I'm the worst producer at the Anfield Wrap, so I apologise, but I think we've got a 4-way connector. Each person having their own individual channel is good as well, because then you can do a little bit on that if you want. Directional mics as much as you can. Get people to hold it like this, like I am, rather than like that. Yeah. They don't have to be expensive though. They're not expensive mics, but we do have one each into their own channel. That's for home games, because where we do the home games now is a really busy pub, and we want that. But obviously, if the background noise becomes too much, so each person's got their own individual mic, and we get into directional straight into it. Be careful with things like road mics, because they just pick up everything.
It's all on the mic. I would say, like, good podcast sound, invest in microphones. If you don't invest in anything else, like, you don't have to invest in a recorder, invest in microphones. So since taking over this job, we do so much at stadiums. As you say, in pubs, we kind of do the same thing. Microphones like these, which are directional, and they plug into a thing called a Zoom. There's loads of different versions of the Zoom. They range from...
Zoom H4, the little one.
I mean, there's that, which ranges, it's about £200 up to about $1,000, which has 8 inputs. But it doesn't really matter about that recorder. It's all about your mic. These mics, like I think they're canonical mics, or what, they will only pick up your voice, and single tracks as well, so that if it is noisy, when I'm talking, I can dip all of their tracks, so you only get one bit of sound rather than 4 times 4 lots of that background sound. No.
Cardioid?
Cardioid and directional, yeah. So basically, you can hold them and you can talk into them this close, and they won't pop. Obviously, you have a mic cover on them, but you should be able to talk this close, and it will only pick up what I'm saying, and you'll barely be able to hear. In Japan, we did a podcast from a pub, and we had 150 listeners come along, and we recorded it while they were all drunk, pissed, like got more and more noisy as the night went on, and you can hear that there's atmosphere, but you can't hear anything they're saying, and it didn't ruin the recording.
Okay, we've just got time for one more question from a gentleman wearing one of our beautiful Pod For It T-shirts here. So your question, sir.
Hello, guys. So I run It's All Cobblers to Me podcast, which is the Northampton Town Football Club podcast. Question for you guys, John and Jay. Your affiliation with the football clubs that you're talking about and you're fans of, how does that work for you guys? We've got, there's no officialdom there or anything like that, but they appreciate that we're there, and as Louise was saying earlier, we can be authentic, we can say whatever we want to, and that's a good thing, but obviously I don't want to upset the team that I support. How do you manage to tip the balance in your favour?
Well, the club don't really like us, if we're being honest. From our point of view. They've asked us to leave training sessions before. They're not very fans, because we're on it. We're just fans. We're just, you know, we've got no job by the club. We're not sort of told what to say. We say what we want.
That's part of your appeal, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if the club, if it's like I said earlier, if the team's shit, we'll say they were shit this weekend. If we don't like the owners, we'll say the owners are taking money out of the club and we don't like them. So the club, they're not going to be inviting us to the Christmas party anytime soon. But our fans and our viewers and our listeners like that. If we were to try and go down the MUTV route and say, hey, United are really great and the owners are fantastic and it's all rosy, then okay, we might get a little bit more access. But why watch us when you can just watch MUTV anyway, or watch Sky and see Gary Neville? There's no point. The whole point of us is we are authentic, we're honest, and we don't have those restrictions. So the club don't really work with us, but perversely, some of the people that have worked on our channel have gone to get jobs on MUTV and things like that. So we still have a little bit of a connection, but they can't stop us speaking as fans. They can't stop us speaking to fans outside the ground. We don't do it on the forecourt, we're not allowed, but we can speak to fans a little bit further down the road, which is what we have to do. They can't stop us, and that is our appeal. So it might be different, no disrespect, if you're a smaller club and you need that access or you need a little bit of that. But at United, there's no point in us going down that route. It's not what the channel was started for. And we get more criticism, we get loads of criticism when we're in bed with the Glazers and we're mates with the owners, and we're not. And it's like, we keep getting that sort of criticism, but if you actually watch us, we just say how it is and our personal opinion. So the club don't really like that, but there's nothing they can do about it.
Just a couple of things. I'd say, don't think sometimes that the football club or whoever it is, if you do a podcast on the Labour Party, or I'm trying not to make this too footy specific, whatever it is you're talking about, don't think that they don't want criticism sometimes. So there might be, if the owner of your football club or whatever makes a decision, there'll be people there who don't like it, and they'll be relying on people like you to give them a kicking. So sometimes someone from Liverpool will get in touch with me. Don't listen to this, Jimmy. And he works for Liverpool. And say, do us a favour and, have a go at that, will you? Because they're not happy, so they rely on us to kind of criticise them and to kind of to kind of put the boot in. Not put the boot in as such, but do you know what I mean?
It's authenticity. Yeah, be authentic, because you can't please everybody. And like in the fight sports game, there's so many different promoters that are expecting me to kiss the backside. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to please my audience and be me, and that's it. At the end of the day, I'm going to piss some people off. That's just the way it is. But the more people that obviously think like I think, come to listen to what we're all doing, then your audience grows, and then those promoters all of a sudden realise the type of power that you've got, and they kind of start to dance to our tune rather than us to dance to
people
theirs.
off too. So the BBC, we piss people off all the time. We have plenty of players or coaches who won't speak to us for periods of time because we've said something they don't like. So if you're going to piss them off, so are we. It's fine.
So we really have run out of time now. Please show your appreciation for our sports fans.
Okay, thank you very much. So if you just thank you.